Now that we added a relay to our configuration, we want to connect this to our primary devices, to the breakers, the CTs and PTs. So after you added a relay, it should be somewhere here on your single line diagram. So if you zoom a little out, you should be able to find it. It moves a little bit here to the right, so if you like, you just move it a little closer to your first bay here. And you see the following on that relay. It basically comes with a circuit breaker and line functions. Circuit breaker functions is usually the control, the interlocks, and a test function. And because we also measure current that flows to the breaker, the connections are made to these functions as well. On the line side, you have all the protective relay functions like weak, in-feed, etc. and differential protection. If you want to remove functions, you just click on them, make a right click, delete a function, or if you want to add functions, you go to your library here on the right hand side and select from the library the function that you want to use. As we can see here already, first of all we need CTs and PTs now single line that we did not put in already. You can do it now at the beginning or later on, whenever you want. So I want to add a CT between the breaker and the disconnect switch, so I'm going to delete that connection, go to my library in the single line and the display elements, open this up and looking for a CT, a three-phase CT. You select it, drag and drop it in your single line diagram, and the connections are made. What you should also look at is on the bottom here in your properties of the CT. You can first of all give it a name, and then you also should put in the ratio of the CT. For example, an 8 to 5 amp CT, because these settings from the single line diagram will be also taken over by Dixi into the relay. So this is our CT. What we also need is a PT for the voltage on the bus for the synchronization. So then you make the connection to the bus bar. So it's connected. You can also right click it and rotate it right so it looks a little nicer. Maybe move it a little bit to here so you have a better overview. Okay, what we also see now, we have two disconnect switches and one circuit breaker, but in our template we only have one circuit breaker and line functions. So the control for the two disconnectors are missing. So if I want to add something to the relay, I go into my library again, I go for the 7SLD and you should find switching devices, and in these switching devices you can have a controllable disconnector or a disconnect that only shows you the status. Because we want to control as well, you just take the disconnector and drop it in your relay. So there's a first disconnector. You can give it a name, like in your single line diagram, disconnector 1. Since we have two, we do the same thing with the second disconnect switch. Drag it from the library and drop it into a relay. There's the second one. Rename it if you like. So now we basically have everything we need for our bay number 2. And now we have to connect the primary values, the measurements, etc., and the controls to that relay. So if you go to this circuit breaker, or let me minimize a little bit the space here that we see more from the single line diagram. I move a little bit up. Okay. If you open up these trees, everything that is black is a control and other colors are measurements. So if you want to control the first disconnect switch, you go from here, hold the mouse and go to your first disconnect switch. And once you see this green symbol, you can release the mouse and it's connected. That's the way how you connect the relay to the single line diagram and synchronize settings. Same thing with the second disconnect switch. and we do have the circuit breaker. Same thing here, you move it and bring this to control the breaker. So these were the controls for bay number 1. What we have not connected yet are the measurements. So here you see the CT input for the 3 phases. The same approach here, you hold the mouse and drag and drop it to the CT and close it, and as you can see there are multiple connections. One were for the circuit breaker functions and also for the line functions. That's where we need the measurement as well. So this connection was made automatically. In order to synchronize the breaker, we need to make these connections to the PT. And now we basically connected everything. You can move these lines around as you like. You can minimize this relay again to have a smaller line here. So this is how you can leave it for now for our exercise.